said, I'm Trevor Prokop, Director of Professional Services here with Critical Design. Today, I'd like to speak with you about Ivanti Security Controls 2019.1. So a little bit about me. I have experience in both the IT operations and security roles. I work with customers to help them solve security challenges, whether that be patch management, vulnerability remediation, or just meeting compliance standards. All right, agenda today. I'd like to discuss challenges with enterprise patching, privilege management, and application control. At the end, we'll review Ivanti Security Control 2019.1 features and use cases along with demos. So why are we here today? And it's really the threat landscape keeps changing. The SLA, the time to patch, keeps decreasing. But due to vulnerability research, the patches become more frequent and more plentiful. So in a perfect world, patches would be deployed without issue or service interruptions. Sometimes those patches would always work. You wouldn't have to roll back. Users would always follow the least privilege access model. IT would always have up-to-date inventory of their hardware and software that's deployed. Implementing security policies wouldn't cause user friction. Compliance reporting may be automated. And security controls are managed, deployed, and reported via a single console. So these are some of the things that Ivanti Security Controls can assist with. So the patch management challenges, really at the end of the day, Microsoft patching has been out there for a long time. WSUS is used to patch frequently, but it really doesn't cover third-party patching, which is where a majority of patches come from. The monthly patch cycle starts every second Tuesday of the month, and from there you get intelligence feeds and US CERT warnings and Microsoft bulletins and Adobe bulletins. Really, you spend so much time between Tuesday and Friday identifying patches. What do we have to install? How are we going to do it? What's going to remediate the vulnerabilities? So you spend all this time doing the research. And then you have to determine, is that just an application update or is that a security patch? What applications need to be deployed? Sometimes patches break functionality and need to be rolled back, and that's always a challenge as well. So you go through all that time identifying the patches, and then you have to go into properly testing the patches. What's your user acceptance testing looking like? How do you carve up your environment to determine whether you're going to patch, dev, test, and promote these changes as people validate that everything's still functioning? All that requires staffing and lead time. And the frequency of the patches, like I said, are just happening so often that once you get done, it's a rinse and repeat process. So you find yourself just finishing up this month's patches, ready to get hit with next month's patching. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, how do you validate that those patches are deployed and the vulnerabilities are remediated? And that comes down to reporting, and that could be a challenge as well. So the overall goal is to decrease the amount of time to apply your patches, how you can meet your regulation and compliance SLAs, and how do you encompass all the systems within your environment. So why worry about third-party apps? And really, it used to be Microsoft was the big player in the game. You'd have to patch all the Microsoft products. But what we're finding out is there's so much application sprawl that the vulnerabilities are actually just on the third-party apps. That's Chrome, Firefox, Opera. You have browsers, you have Java, Adobe Flash. Then you got all the meeting suites, GoToMeeting, Zoom, WebEx, or remote access like TeamViewer, LogMeIn, VNC. Even things like VMware Tools, KeyPass, Notepad++, all these applications are introduced onto your endpoints, and you have to find a good way to patch. Ivanti can patch this list here on the right-hand side, you see, and that's just alphabetical. The list is hundreds. So there's quite a bit of patching that you can deploy there. You see you have your Adobe patches here that just keep coming up, Flash, Adobe. Then you get into privilege management challenges, right? It's very difficult to follow the least privilege model when you have that application that needs administrator access, or you have functions that aren't available in the user context. Microsoft pretty much gives you limited granularity. It's the user. It's not context aware. You can't set up rights per application or task. It's really difficult to balance that user productivity and security. You lock down the system too much, people can't be productive. We see that all the time. If somebody does need elevated rights, what's the lead time? Is that a week? Is that 2 weeks? Do they have to go to their security rep and make a case for you to get elevated rights? Increased number of employees working remotely is always a challenge because now everybody's not well connected to the LAN. You have people on laptops that maybe never step foot in the home office. And then ultimately, if you give somebody admin rights, you really have zero control over what they can do. So there's no way to decrease the privileges associated with an administrator account. Another set here is application control security challenges. And it's users want to be able to install software without IT involvement. They join a WebEx, and you know how that is. You always join at the last minute, and then you find out you need an update, or you don't have the installer, you can't execute it, and you're limited. So that causes some friction. Whitelisting, it's a great idea. App whitelisting is great, but when you have so many systems running so many different versions, if they're hash-based, those hashes change anytime there's an update deployed. So that makes it very difficult. Majority of the defense mechanisms are detection dependent. So you're not limiting the application access based on behavior. It's based on whether there's a known signature for it. IT is usually unaware of the software that's installed on their workstations. They don't have great inventory. Patching remote systems is just always a challenge. And ransomware is on the rise. I mean, we read about it every week. So here's an excerpt from the 2019 Red Canary Threat Detection Report. So if you follow the MITRE attack framework, you'll see they categorize techniques that are used by adversaries. And you see here PowerShell T1068 occurs, and this is a 5-year snapshot, occurs twice as much as any other technique. So that's a big attack surface, and it's because every workstation since 2009 came with PowerShell installed by default, and it's executable by the users. So you really have to kind of limit that down. Here you can see on the left screen there, that's just a obfuscated way to launch PowerShell, where it's really depending on whether you're antivirus or you can actually detect it. All right, so stopping ransomware, here's a couple of examples. Locker, Goga, you have Emotet, you got VBA-based macros, all concerns. So what's the solution? The solution is Ivanti security controls. Now this is the 2019 version. Ivanti security controls takes two of my favorite products, really. Ivanti patch for Windows and Ivanti application control. They've expanded on the feature set. They took the best of the application control and they merged them together into one product. So it's one management platform, and we're going to dig into that today. So how can ISeC help? CIS framework here shows top 20 out of the top security controls, the top 5, if you address those, will decrease your attack surface here by about 85%. Now, Ivanti security controls covers the top 3. It's inventory of hardware assets, inventory of software assets, and vulnerability management. How can ISeC help? Like we talked here, the hardware, the software, and the administrative privileges. So ISeC application control allows you to remove admin rights from those users and just makes specific applications run under the admin context. So it decreases your attack surface. Ivanti security controls, from the patch standpoint here, has the ability to patch Microsoft and third-party patches. It's agent-based or agentless, depending on the use case. So that really comes in handy if you're just scanning servers. You don't really need the agent. If you're scanning remote laptops that rarely connect to the LAN, you'd probably be interested in the agent-based. These syncs up to the Ivanti cloud and can be managed and reported on from there. You can patch physical workstations, virtual workstations, servers, all of them are integrated. You also, this is a unique feature here, VMware virtual environments. So you can patch your virtual machines that are online, you can patch the offline ones, you can patch templates. How many times have you requested a VM from the server team, and when they deliver it, it's missing several months worth of patches, and it takes you hours to get it patched? What if they could just automatically boot up the template, deploy patches, and then shut it back down? Yeah, asset inventory, hardware, software, BIOS, disk space remaining, firmware versions. You really get a snapshot into all of that information. Then we bring in the automation piece where you can schedule your patches. Once you set out the criteria of what you want to scan, when you want to patch it, you can set up scheduled tasks. And then at the end of the day, you can have full reporting. There's executive summaries all the way down to the details, which specific patches on which specific server or workstation. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So we take the Ivanti app control key features, which we talked about: privilege management, executable control, browser control. There's a great new event viewer. So what you can do is, as you're deploying the restricted administrator rights on your workstations, you can have some of the data in a report-only mode, filter up to the top, and then you can massage your policy so that when you deploy that in a hardened fashion, that you have most of the key applications out of the way. So users really shouldn't notice that you've deployed anything. You have role-based administration, database maintenance. So the key features here of ISeC bring in the feature set from Ivanti Patch for Windows, introduced brand new Linux patching. So right now it's at Red Hat. That will OS X and CentOS are next. And then we go into, I think some of the future roadmap may have had Ubuntu and SUSE. So then they brought in this new feature for CVE to patch. So a lot of times you take your output from your vulnerability scanner, Nessus, Qualys, Rapid7, and you get a whole bunch of CVEs, and you're tasked with remediating. So what do? You can import the CVE list. It'll tell you which patches you need. You set up a scan template, you deploy. And then you have the app control privilege management function, which is formerly part of the UWM suite, which was application control. So it took some of the main features from that and integrated it. So we talked about the ISeC features here. We talked about Red Hat 6 and 7. REST API for the DevOps folks on the call. Anybody interested in automating some of the administration functions, or maybe you're automatically patching workstations as they're provisioned? It's an option here. Maybe you want to do a scan just to make sure before you put something in production that it's been, meets all the compliance standards. This is a great way to do so. Then we talked about the CVEs to patch group. So what kind of patches are available? Really, we talk here Microsoft Patch Tuesday, and that's pretty much the de facto standard. Once Microsoft releases their patches, later in the day, Adobe follows suit, all the other big players, Java. They release their patches. Ivanti, they release patches on Patch Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Friday, and if there's a 0 day, the same day. So what you see here, this is just a snapshot of June. You see all the 15 new bulletins, 12 critical, 14 user targeted. So Ivanti does a really good job putting together this information on a monthly basis. If you're not going to their webinars on Patch Tuesday, you should make it a point to do so. They're very informative. They go through what all the context around the patches and things to kind of look out for. One of the things here I saw, the Adobe, this was actually an update from May where one single patch from Adobe remediated 84 CVEs. So that just shows you, just being one patch behind really opens the door to the attackers. So what's the benefit of using Ivanti Patch? Well, Ivanti Patch is powered by Shavlik Labs. Shavlik Labs tests every language that's supported for the OS, the service packs, make sure that there's proper detection, that the installation works, the dependencies are there, and rollback if possible. They do a file comparison, and that Shavlik Labs has the equipment to patch against hundreds of different test beds. So we talk about patch management. It's the automated deployment of OS to third parties. It's agentless or agent-based. That comes into play, like I mentioned, if it's a laptop, if it's something that's off network, if it's something in your DMZ, maybe you don't want to open up to the your LAN. There's some options there. Also, the one feature here is the precise reboot options. I mean, when you have to patch an Exchange server, it would be nice to fail it over before you patch it. Fail it over to the inactive node, or a SQL server, or a web server. Take it out of service before you patch it. That'll minimize some of the user impact or maybe customer-facing systems. They also have the feature here for common IT functions. So there's some baked-in IT scripts. And an example of that would be after you deploy Adobe Reader, maybe you want to turn off the auto update function because that's something you want IT to manage. So they've done some of the logic in the background to be able to turn off these features or run scripts afterwards, insert custom configuration files that you might have that you need to be integrated with the package. Or maybe you want to use the scripts feature to communicate out to your load balancer to disable a member server prior to patching. There's a lot of different features there, but definitely a good feature to have. So here you see the agentless architecture. What you see is the XML is more like the data feed, right? This just tells you what patches are available. And you see the Ivanti console server. So the patches come down in the XML format, which once you see that in the console, that's when you go through the approval process. And when you approve the patches, you go through and you scan, and then the patches come down, and they're deployed to the Ivanti server. So all of them become stored there as a repository. And then your machine groups all get the patches. So you eliminate some of the bandwidth requirements there. We have the agent list here, which you can go through and you see, I missed the slide, sorry. Agent list here where you just have the scan groups. And you have the agent architecture. And this is, you see on the right-hand side, there is a laptop that would be off-premise. So that would communicate directly to the Ivanti cloud. The agent policy is deployed from the server to the cloud to the agent. And then the patches go direct from the vendor right to the laptop. And there's no need for the laptop to communicate back to the console server. It'll go direct to the cloud. So here's our distributed architecture. This is a little bit more of a combination where you have a distributed server that is off-premise. So that's basically just taking your patches. Maybe it's a branch office that you're hosting, or that any of those workstations would pull from the distribution server rather than your central. So that decreases some of the network requirements because the patches are only being deployed once across that wire. And you have the additional servers could be installed to manage other sites. This is pretty much it's the hybrid architecture. It's a little bit of everything, right? You got the agent policies up top. On the bottom here, you have other distribution centers and then even remote console servers if you have some branch offices out there as well. So it's very, very flexible. We get into the Linux patching here. And the keys here is it's agent-based right now. You go out and you can see, you can set up your scan schedules and deployment schedules. And the process here is customers have to have Red Hat subscription. So they register with the RHSM. ISeC contacts the Ivanti cloud with all the metadata, deploys the ISeC agent to the Red Hat endpoints. The Red Hat endpoints send the information back to the console, and any missing patches are show with an X, and then you can select those patches and deploy them. At that point, the workstation or server would go out and use an yum, contact the repository, and download those patches directly. Patches come down as RPM files. patches install, and then the job's complete. And then the ISeC agents kind of report back in and tell you how the deployment went. So here's just a graphic of that process. All right, patch REST APIs. We talked about this a little bit from the DevOps angle. You have the ability to provide remote access to the console. And it's just integration points for other applications. You can use PowerShell, that's still going to be supported, but it also brings on the support of C++, Ruby, Python, C#, Java. So there's a lot of different features there, and that's all basic request responses in JSON format. So CVE to patch, we talked about this a little bit before. This is where you take the CSV from either a text document or an output from your vulnerability scanner. You import them in, it identifies the CVEs, you tell it what OS you're looking to patch, it creates the patch group. So we'll go into a demo of that as well. All right, application control. So this was we talked about this being able to remove administrator rights and do whitelisting without the whitelist, right? So it relies on the trusted ownership model, which is part of it. It's built into Windows, it's NTFS. So every file on your system has an owner. So what this does is it says, well, we're not going to worry about trust in the application. We're going to trust the person that put it there. If they are part of the 4 defaults, the built-in administrators or trusted installers, or maybe it's your patch management or a patch deployment solution, SCCM, EPM. However the software gets there, if it's one of these named users that put it there, it's going to be trusted. Users are going to be able to run it. So it gives you a lot of flexibility there. And what it does is it prohibits your users from introducing software that's not permitted. You could do digital signature hashing, and it's contextually aware. So you could have different scenarios for different workstations, different user groups, different networks, etc. So the key feature here, though, that comes to mind is blocking malware and ransomware from running, because generally that software is introduced by your user. User clicks on a bad link. User opens up a Word document with macros enabled. This is going to stop it. It's not relying on detection. It'll check the ownership of the malicious file and say, that's not one of the trusted owners, we're going to prohibit it from running. So this requires an agent, but also has some flexibility. You can see in the right pane, you can break down what group memberships, what people are able to run. You can select specific file hashes or locations, and even create exclusions for that. So we'll get into that demo as well. Privilege management, end users with admin rights, that's a huge security risk. They can install whatever software they want, they can click on whatever they want, and it's generally just bad practice. It probably is something that you're going to get dinged on your compliance as well. So the problem is taking away those admin rights, standard user privileges are sometimes not enough, and then you have to make exceptions. So the solution here is to remove the admin rights from your end users, elevate privileges on an application level or a process level. And then it still runs in the user context. Everything the user is running as the user. That one app will have an administrator token in it. So we go into the event viewer. When you deploy application control to your endpoints, you can put it in a monitoring mode where you just put it out there, just see what your endpoints are running. See if something would be blocked. You collect that data, and here you can see that somebody was trying to run regedit, notepad, and putty. So you can take this information based on the file hash or some of the metadata like company name or file description or version and make exclusions. Maybe we want people to run putty, so we can make an exclusion before we push our policy. All right, so that brings us to the demo. So let's see. I think we got this guy. And I'm probably going to move this new share. All right, so here we are. Let's just bring up the Ivanti security controls. And what we have here, this is the main landing page of the Ivanti Security Controls product. You see two panes here. One's patch management, one's application control. Patch management is the default version in application or security controls, and then the add-on feature for application control is right here as well. So you can see this nice heads-up display. You can see any issues that were out there. You can make sure that your data versions are up to date. You got your patches, you got your definitions, everything's running as it should be. And you can even check your compliance score here to see how many systems have been scanned or have the AC policy deployed. Another option here on the screen is just to click on the deployment here. These are the patch content. This is what's available, and this is just today's the 20th, so this was yesterday. So yesterday a new Chrome update came out, a new Firefox update came out, Good Sync, microcode updates for Microsoft, .NET frameworks. So a lot of information. Now we just had to go back a few days here. You can see GIMP, Opera, Plex, Zoom, Chrome, Thunderbird. The list goes on. And you can just keep scrolling through. And these are just patches that, if you're not watching for third-party patches to become available, how are you going to know? VLC Media Player. And we just go back to Patch Tuesday here, and you see these were released at 10/13. So the question always comes up, well, how long does it take Shavlik to test these patches? And the answer is really about less than 12 hours from when Microsoft releases them, which is pretty good turnaround. I generally don't look at patches until at least Wednesday or so, just because they're subject to change. So this is just a, see a Skype update. So they break it down whether it's security or not security. So for instance, here's 2 Tomcat updates. You probably want to deploy them. All right. So what does it look like to patch? You see on the left-hand side, I have my machine groups. But I want to work backwards from this, so I want to look at the deployment templates. So at the bottom here I have, and what the deployment templates are is, this is going to be how do we deploy the patches, right? After you find the patches you need and select them and schedule them, how are you going to deploy them? And you can see here, just moving left to right on the tabs, here's where you have the options. If you're going to shut down SQL, IIS, delete your temp files afterwards. You have pre-deployment, which is interesting. I mean, that gives you the ability, maybe you want to reboot before you deploy patches. Maybe you want to have the user have a pop-up message telling them that, hey, it's time to reboot, we have to deploy patches. And it gives them the ability to extend that timeout value, if you configure so here. And it would look something like this. So we have the post-deployment options, which is what do you want to do after the patches, and always reboot, sometimes reboot, only when needed. What's great here is the ability to schedule your reboots. Maybe you patch and then you have a maintenance window that you want to make sure everything's patched, but you really can't reboot until maybe 5 a.m. You can configure that here. Here's email. So after patches go out, what's going to happen? We're going to send emails with the status report. You can pick what type of reports you want, pick who you want them sent to. There's some granularity too. If you have specific server owners that maybe should receive a specific report, but maybe not all reports, you can get that granular. Custom actions is where you can schedule some of those scripts. This is distribution servers. You tell those workstations where they should pull this patch from, if it's coming from the console, if it's coming from a distribution server that's closer to them. This is where you build in some of that logic. The VMware hosted VMs and templates. This is actually one of my favorite features because you could take pre-deployment snapshots. So you can go out and say, snapshot every VM the moment I say patch, and it's going to keep. You can take pre or post deployment VMs. You can do snapshots, and you can actually, it'll automatically purge and prune out any of your old snapshots. After 2 snapshots, we'll keep, delete them after 2 days. So that's our deployments, and we say, well, okay, if that's that's how we're deploying, what are we going to deploy? And this is the scan template. So this is where you see on the right-hand side, these are what patches, what criticality what criticality we're going to look for: critical, important, moderate, low. So if you just want to deploy the security patches, only the critical ones, that's part of your SLA, then you can only click, you can select the critical and then minimize how many patches you need to deploy. But when you look at it, you look at the list here, and 7-zip stands out. You got Apple, you got all the Adobes, and I mean, this is the whole suite. You go down, you have Citrix, all the GoToMeetings, receivers, Foxit, GIMP. You go all the way to the bottom here, all the way down to Wireshark, WinZip, and Splunk, which is great because of the universal forwarder. You can always make sure that's up to date. And maybe you have VMware tools. You can also update VMware tools automatically with any of the patches that are required. So there's a lot of granularity there. You basically then come through, you can say, well, what do we want to show? Missing patches or both. Software distribution is a way to deploy software if you need it to. Here again is the reporting. All right, so we get down into, well, what machines are we going to patch? So you can see I have my machines broken up into different environments here. I have my test environment, which really consists of anything that I need to be able to, I don't care about it too much. I can patch it and it's going to have minimal impact on my users, but it gives me a good test bed to see if anything is going to happen. I have my primary servers. So these are all the, if I have anything in a high availability pair, I'm going to patch one of them first. And then secondary servers will be my 2s. And then I have my standalone. If I only have a single server, I don't want to patch that first, right? I don't want to introduce any risk to the environment. So I have those different machine groups. When you're in a machine group, if you want to add a new machine to it, you have the ability here. You can add it by machine name, and I can just look through my domain, pick the servers I want to add, and hit assign. Enter in the browse credentials. I have several browse credentials here, depending on what I'm trying to patch. You have the ability just to scan the whole domain. So I actually have a scan set up that on every Sunday, it's going to scan my whole domain and just give me patch status. It doesn't deploy, it just does a scan. But that's a nice feature there too. You get into the hosted VMs, so you can see the ISeC servers that I have and any of the VMs I have hosted on there. If you have workstation VMs, whether they're offline and sitting out on a file share, you can also import those and patch those. You can run against the whole IP range. Maybe you have a few subnets that you want to patch. You don't know all the systems that are on there. Maybe they're not domain joined, but you want to be able to scan those as well. Active Directory OUs, and so on. So it gives you quite a bit that you can pick from. All right, and then we talk about scheduled tasks here. So I got my scheduled console. I mentioned how I patch. So my test servers automatically get patched on the second Wednesday of the month at 5 o'clock. And then my primary servers will wait till Friday to patch. Secondary servers are the following Tuesday. So that's one full week after Patch Tuesday. You do have the deployment option too to stage your patches, so that if you want it, maybe you want to start staging, which means downloading and scheduling them, making sure everything's there. You can do that. You can stage them in advance. And you see I even have, here's that scan, my domain every Saturday at 7 actually. All right, so we'll take a look here at the VMware integration points. You can look at the virtual inventory. You can see my ISeC servers. And if I were to click on one here, I have the ability here to look at the VMs that are there, and it gives me a nice heads-up display of whether I got VMware tools running, whether it's current, whether the VMs are powered on, powered off, resources allocated to it, OS, IP address. And then you can look at the bulletins, and this is actually the patches for VMware, the underlying host. So I have a bug fix that I need to deploy. It's going to require a reboot in maintenance mode. So if I wanted to do so, I can deploy the bulletin, and my environment would patch. All right, so let's take a look at patching some of those VMware machines. So if I look at the VMware machine group patching, and I'm just going to run the operation. I have 3 VMs that I chose. That's my Splunk server, Unify server, so I'm going to just run the operation. I'm going to take the security patches only. In this list here, you can see I have whether it be security patches, it's all patches, Windows Update scanning. You got any of the approved patches, maybe it's a Nessus scan, third-party apps. So I have quite a few different policies. I'm just going to take the scan template. And we're not going to stage anything right now. And let's scan and see what happens. So only take a moment. All right, so we got the scan is complete. So let's take a look here at the Unify server. I'm going to view my results. So we click on the Unify server, and you see here in the filter criteria, I just typed the word missing. So this will show me just the missing patches. If I don't want to filter, I can see all the patches that are deployed, but let's just go with missing. And I can see here I have a Firefox update that's required. So let's deploy. And I'm going to say select a patch. I have the ability here, and before we do so, you can click on that update and say, well, what is it? And you can see the security bulletin that's associated with it. You can click on any of the patches that are required here. It'll give you all the CVEs that are remediated. So we'll click on the Firefox one, and I will deploy, select the patches. And here we have the ability, this is where I pick my scan template. So I'm going to immediate reboot with an email and a VM snapshot. I'm going to do it now, and I'm going to install the packages and deploy. That should be a pretty quick download. Right now, the patches are going to be downloaded to the console server, which I'm remoted into. Files downloaded. Files are being copied out to the Unify VM. And what we should be able to see here, if I switch over to that vSphere, you see that I'm cleaning up a snapshot. So I created a snapshot. It's removing the snapshot, probably because I had met my 2 snapshot requirement on this. And we see that the patch is scheduled. So that should proceed and install and reboot. All right, so we want to take a look here quick at Linux. And back from the console, what I can do is look at home, look at my machines, look at my Linux patch, and you can see here that I have the Linux agent that's already deployed. And you can see some of the patches that I'm missing here. So if you wanted to pick a specific Linux patch, this one looks important, 9.8 is the score. And I just add it to my patch group. And I have the option if I want to deploy now or save, and when the agent checks in, it'll be made aware of it, and then it'll follow its normal patch schedule that's configured for that agent. And we can take a look here at the machine groups. I have a Linux machine group. And if I look at my machine group, you see my Red Hat 7 box to deploy the agent to it. It's just a matter of clicking on the agent. And this would have been done before it showed up on the console, but I just want to show how easy this process is. There we go, we got Relo 1. I pick the agent, and I hit install. So that's pretty straightforward. All right, so let's take a look here at the CVE import. And what we could do, I stood up a Nessus box just to scan some of my hosts and import this. So I have a missing updates. If I click on that, and it's actually probably over, let's click it and export. And we're going to export. You see I have some vulnerabilities out here that I have to remediate. This could be any scanner that you have. We'll just put it out to a CSV. We leave the default values. We export out. I'll just save it to a common location. missing updates. So then when I come over to Ivanti patch, I have the ability to import from CVEs and browse to grab that missing updates, open. Then you extract the CVEs. It pulls all the CVEs out of the file that it finds a match for. That's quite a bit. Select your operating system. Then you can add it to a template. So Nessus remediations, create an update package, close. So then the next time I create a baseline, I can make sure that I have those patches included in it. Maybe you want to determine, recently Bluekeep came out. So you have that CVE number, you import that CVE number, and you want to scan across your whole environment, make sure you're remediated everywhere. That's how you do it. All right. One of the other options here, if you want to go out to another place that I like to go for checking patches is Zero Day in the Wild. This is an Excel sheet that Project Zero team maintains. You go out here, you can find any of your zero-day exploits that were available. You can grab these CVEs from here, and you can ingest those right in from a normal text document. There we are. So pretty straightforward, but a lot of value there. All right, last item here, coming up here, asset inventory. So we want to take a look at what does it mean when we do asset inventory, and we can take a look here at our machines, and we can take a look at our assets, and what we can do is, let's see here, I have physical workstation. So it's my laptop. What you can see is all the software that's been inventoried on my system. And then the hardware assets. So you can take a look here, you can get my serial number, version. You have the ability to take a look here at what type of board I have, what my BIOS release is. So you get all that information. It just kind of aggregates back up to the main console. So then we have this other display here. We want to take a look at charts. And charts gives you this nice heads-up display of operating systems that you have out there. What's the top missing patches? Which are the most vulnerable machines? Which ones do you want to focus on? What type of patches are out there? Are they just low risk or are they critical? So you get that. And these are, we can go in here. We can take a look at creating a report, and you can also go through and take a look at the executive summary, generate reports. This is what an executive summary would look like. For 47 machines are included. Here's the patch status. So really nice output. And then you can get granular as you want. There's over 30 reports in here. All right, so that's patch. Right, so that's just this one side. So then we get into application control, and I know I'm probably running a little short on time, so I'll try and be quick. I'll combine some of the efforts here in the patch. So what you look at here is I have this Win 10 workstation. All right, I can launch Google Chrome. I can launch Word. I pretty much do a number of things here. And even, so the process, this is just a standard workstation. These users, this is a non-admin user, but I can run PowerShell, which we talked about being a big risk vector there. And, I even just came up here quick with a Word document with a macro enabled. So what I want to look at here is if I just launch this Word document, this might be something your HR team gets, and it executed some code. Word shouldn't launch PowerShell, right? But that's how easy it is. And fortunately, that's nothing we should be worried about because it's it's just a demo. But you see how that works. It just launches PowerShell. So we have that. Let's say we went out to the internet and we downloaded uTorrent. Let's see, portable, and see how quick this downloads. Now this is just a standard scenario where maybe users are launching applications and downloading and installing software that maybe you don't want on your device. All right, well, fortunately I downloaded that in advance. So if I take the uTorrent portable and double click it, you can see I'm ready to install. So even though I'm not an admin, I'm going to be able to install uTorrent. So how do we stop people from doing that? They maybe introduce PuTTY, uTorrent, just a few other things. So that's the negative effects of having rights to be able to introduce software on the system. But one of the complaints you might receive from a user, you took away their admin rights, and now they can't do something simple like adjust the date and time. So back one. So you lock down the system. They could still download stuff from the internet, but they can't change the date and time without being an admin. So that's a problem. That introduces user friction. Maybe somebody's traveling out to the West Coast. They got to change their time. Another example that we can look at here is if we run Notepad. Sometimes people maybe want them to change their host file. All right. So if you ever tried doing Windows System 32 drivers etc, and you try and modify the host file, if somebody tried to do this and save, they can't because this application is running as a user. We can prove that out here under Elevated. I already have it. So Elevated, you can find Notepad, and you see Elevated is no. So that means it's running under the user context. So we won't be able to do anything there. So we showed PuTTY, Notepad. Common issue is you take away admin rights. People need to manage their print spooler. Well, they don't have the ability to do so. And that causes some pain points too, because that's relatively straightforward. So what's the solution, right? So we take a look here. Let's jump back into our console, and we're going to edit the application control configuration. And we'll just run through here pretty quick. Application control has this context-aware menu on the left-hand side. You can pick different users, pick different groups. You have the ability here for the trusted ownership, which we talked about earlier. These are the default trusted owner accounts. If somebody puts software on that system and it's owned by these users, it'll continue to run. If not, it'll be prohibited. So we have the ability to stop batch files, make local drives allowed, etc. So going through here, what I'd like to do is we look at the executable control, and if I set that to restricted, and I were to say save and deploy now, we can see that once the agent gets the new policy, there it is. All right, we can switch back over to that VM. And you can see I could still launch Google Chrome. I can still launch Word. But if I come out to my downloads, I can't launch uTorrent. And really what it comes down to here is if you take a look at we talked about the NTFS permissions. If you look at the security tab and look at advanced, you see that's owned by test user, and they weren't in that list of trusted owners. So it's going to be denied access. So the question is, well, why does Google Chrome work? Well, you take a look at the executable for Chrome, and you see that it's owned by system, and system was part of that original list. Also, if somebody gets that malicious software, malicious document via email, and they try and launch it, PowerShell is prohibited. Now, what you can do, if you have scripts that are required to run, just make sure they're owned by one of those trusted owners and it'll run. But the user won't be able to execute PowerShell. And that'll solve for what you saw as the largest technique in the MITRE attack framework. So what we haven't done yet is take a look at date and time modification, notepad, and the print spooler. So we can go ahead and take a quick look at that, and then we'll wrap up the demo. So if we take a look at this policy again, and we look at the everyone, and we say executable control, we already set restricted. Privilege management, we're going to say, let's go out to C Windows System 32 notepad.exe. Built-in elevate, so we want to allow that. Now, if this was an admin account, we wanted to restrict the ability, we can actually say built-in restrict. So you have that ability, and you know, from there, it'll hit add. So now Notepad should run in an admin context, and this is a scenario where maybe you have one application that requires admin rights, and you're forced to give the entire user admin rights on that workstation. That solves that problem. If we look at our components, we add a component here. You know, we can take a look. We did date and time. So we can say, let them change the date and time, and built-in elevate. We have the ability for self-elevation, where what that does is that basically tells if the user is prohibited or would be prohibited from running it after you made the change, gives them the ability to say, okay, and it generates a log. Okay, they can run it, but it generates a log, and then you see it in the console, and you know that you need to make a policy change. And you could use that. It's really good in testing scenarios because it gives the user the ability to tell you what they were trying to run without actually interacting with them. You can just take a look at it from there. So we take a look at system controls, and we'll take a look at the display name. We're going to go down to print spooler. And you can see there's a whole list. Just pick and choose some of the common ones. So we save and deploy. And we're almost there.
Hey, Trevor, I'm having some questions come in from our audience. Can I throw a couple of these at you quick?
Sure.
Sure. You know, one of our attendees said, what is the best approach for applying patches in an agentless environment?
Well, in an agentless environment, it means everything's connected to the LAN. So going through, you would come up with your patch group. You would identify which workstations maybe have certain patches it should get or different reboot schedules. Then when you scan against those workstations, you can select the times that you want them deployed, schedule them, patch them, and then report on them afterwards. So the agentless is one of the easiest deployment methods because everybody's had enough of the security stack, right? Sometimes they just don't want anything else on the endpoint. So that's the best practice I would go with.
And I think you might have answered this one, but how often is the patch catalog updated?
Patch catalog is updated every Patch Tuesday, Wednesdays, Fridays, and if there's a 0 day available.
Okay. And one last one. Are app control policy changes in real time, or is a restart required?
All right, so as you saw, I didn't reboot this workstation. I didn't even log out of it. Same user signed in without admin rights. I'm going to adjust the date and time, and I'm going to click on the date and time. And right here, where I normally would be prohibited from changing the time, now I could change it. So okay. You see the date and time is fixed. Users might have reported issues with the services. And we can take a look at the print spooler. Oh, did I not grab that one? Oh, that one's not good. Yeah. And then we'll take a look at Notepad. You can see where Notepad was previously not elevated. I should be able to see here that the user Notepad, you see Notepad now has an elevated right, which means I should be able to go out here, open make a change to my host file, save, and close, which was something that I was prohibited from doing earlier.
Cool, cool.
That
And
wraps up my demo.
right on. Trevor, could you put your email address just in case anybody has any questions or concerns? Feel free to reach out to Trevor. And we thank everybody for attending today. If anybody would like a transcript of this webinar, just please feel free to reach out to us. We'll make it happen.